Look, Olivia, you know Mr. Jacobson wants this first thing in the morning, which is why you shouldn't have waited until the end of the day to get started on your portion of the spreadsheet. I sighed. I already knew where this was going. I know, said Andrew, but I need this evening off. It's Michael's 4th birthday, I just can't miss the celebration. You'll understand when you have kids. I'll make this up to you. You already owe me one, I said. This makes 2 favors. Heck, I should just take a few days off at this point and leave you to do my job for me. So you'll cover for me tonight, said Andrew with relief. Thank you so much. By the way, is everything okay at your place? I'm hearing a lot of racket. Yeah, don't worry, everything's just fine. What about you? You've got something funny on your neck. Huh? He responded, oblivious to the metal speck I noticed under his chin. Never mind, I said. It wasn't my problem and I had work to do. I ended the Zoom call and removed my headphones. Leaning back in my seat, I reflected on the evening ahead. I had at least 3 more hours of work thanks to Andrew flaking out. And I knew better than to even ask my supervisor and team leader, Mr. Jacobson, for overtime. And to make matters worse, my roommates May and Gerald were having a loud enough argument for my coworker to hear it through my computer. I decided to break for dinner before resuming the tedious monthly budget analysis. I opened the door from my bedroom to the cramped kitchen shared by the 3 of us. Gerald was already inside. I offered a casual hello, only to freeze when I noticed the bulging suitcase that he was dragging to the side of the door that led to the driveway. Oh, I muttered, a bit startled. Yeah, said Gerald. He gave me a polite hug. Hopefully it'll get a bit quieter around here for you now. I hadn't realized that things between him and May have reached a breaking point. May and I had been close once. I guess this is what happens when your job sucks away all your energy. You lose touch with people that you care about, even when they're among the only ones that you ever see in person. I helped Gerald carry some of his belongings to his car. As we hauled a box of clothes down the short outer staircase, I noticed a small piece of metal jutting out from his arm. Is your arm okay? I asked him as we lowered the box into his trunk. Yeah, why wouldn't it be? I took a closer look at it. It was a zipper. But why would a zipper be attached to his arm? He looked at his arm and, seemingly finding nothing unusual, resumed loading his vehicle. He lifted a toolkit that was slightly ajar. As he repositioned it, his arm muscles clenched, causing the zipper to shift half an inch down. A thin trail of blood leaked out of the gap that had emerged. I gasped. Gerald, somehow still oblivious, gave me a perplexed look before turning back to the half house the 3 of us, while 2 of us now rented. May stood in the open door frame. Her face was red and tearful. See you around, May, said Gerald, and good luck. She waved faintly. I went over to comfort her. Gerald could deal with the bizarre cut on his arm on his own. May needed my company that night. I hated telling her that I had to get back to work. As grating as my job was, it would be disastrous if I were to lose it. I worked past midnight. My wary eyes glazed past the terms that always floated around the descriptions of projects ongoing at my company. Words like bioelectronic, transfection, and electrotransmission, and towards the numbers that formed the basis of my job. Finally, I submitted the complete report at 1:15 a.m. I fought to open my eyes the next morning. Mr. Jacobson didn't respond to my daily morning check-in email. The next time that I heard from him was that afternoon, when he sent a message to our whole team, with a higher-up manager CC'd. Thank you, Andrew, for the excellent work as always. My name wasn't mentioned. After work, I finally touched base with May, who had just finished a virtual tutoring gig. I just realized things with Gerald weren't going to get any better, she told me. So instead of dodging all the issues like we always do, I insisted that we talk it out last night. It got pretty heated as you heard, but he eventually decided to leave. He's moving in with his brother in the east side for the time being. I told her that I was sorry, both because of what had happened and because I hadn't been there for her as her relationship had fallen apart. I don't blame you, said May. Honestly, I think we both knew things had run their course between us a while ago, but we didn't want to have to deal with one of us moving out during the pandemic. But we could only put off dealing with. Hey, did you cut yourself? I interrupted, noting a drop of blood running down her cheek. What? No, I don't think so. Just turn your head to the right and stay still, I instructed. Behind her left ear, a metal zipper lingered on the surface of her skin, just beneath her hairline. What is that? What's what? Asked May, understandably worried. The zipper was embedded into her skin. It appeared to have dropped from its starting point by a fraction of an inch, undoing her skin as it went. A small quantity of blood dripped out of the gap that it left behind. I dabbed the blood with a tissue, applied an antibiotic cream, and pulled the zipper back up where it appeared to stay relatively secure. Before I could get a bandage, May rushed to the bathroom mirror to see it for herself. Her reaction left me even more befuddled than before. I'm telling you, it was right there, I said. I saw it and I touched it. But she was correct. When I looked again, there was no zipper to be found. Olivia, look, there's obviously nothing here, said May. Are you okay? I mean, it wouldn't make any sense for there to be a zipper on me in the first place. And it's not like I felt one. I just don't understand, I said. I'm sure that I saw it. Same with Gerald and Andrew too. It was her turn to be confused when I showed her the drops of blood on the tissue that I had used. Neither of us knew what to make of it. The best answer for what happened that we could come up with was that May had accidentally scratched herself without realizing it, and that I had been mistaken about what I had seen. But it wasn't a satisfying explanation. I began to notice zippers on my coworkers during our daily video calls. Kelly had one that drooped awkwardly from her right cheek. Andrew's dangled lower and lower on his neck, yet he never seemed to notice even as blood had started to leak out of it. I tried alerting him again, but he and everybody else on the call acted hostile in response. He looks fine to me, said Mr. Jacobson. Get it together, Olivia. Work droned on. I quickly lost interest in intervening to protect my virtual colleagues. I had myself to look after. The friendship between May and me benefited from Gerald's departure. We watched movies and sat around our record player listening to music. One Friday night, we even repeated something May had liked doing during college, a ghost story themed sleepover party. It was just the two of us, but with the assistance of a couple of mixed drinks, we had a nice enough time as she narrated a handful of tales to me. I awoke Saturday morning in a sleeping bag on the floor of May's room. Liquid dripped against my cheek. I shot awake, worried about a water leak. Instead, I found the source to be the head of my slumbering friend, which lay partially over the edge of her bed frame. The zipper had reappeared. It had drifted downwards and red droplets again trickled out of the opening. Moving carefully, I gripped the metal and pulled it back up. May didn't stir as I wiped away the blood. I left to clean my own face, and when I returned, I noticed that May's zipper had again disappeared. I didn't know what to believe. May would think that I was crazy if I brought the zippers up again, but if I were just imagining things, where did the blood come from? I told May the next day that I had been seeing the zippers again, though I didn't mention hers in particular. Olivia, she told me firmly, There are no metal zippers on me or on any of your coworkers. That's impossible and you know that. But the blood, May shrugged. Like we said, I must have cut myself by accident. That's the only possibility, right? I told her that I agreed. Until I could make sense of what I was seeing, I decided to not bring it up again. That Monday morning, Andrew confided in me that his mother was in the hospital. She's on a ventilator, he sent to me via chat. It's hard for me to focus knowing that her life is on the line. I sent him some supportive messages and offered to cover for him again. During our next daily team call, Andrew's video at first refused to load. It finally appeared while Mr. Jacobson was lecturing us about a new procedure for logging complaints of in-house contagions in pre-pandemic experimental exposure. Andrew's decrepit appearance had shocked me. Beneath the eyes he fought to keep open, a long red gash extended down his neck. His zipper had dropped to somewhere on his chest. Blood oozed out and soaked through his stained blue shirt. Slowly his head lowered. He teetered and then fell to the floor. "Geez, Andrew, are you okay?" I asked. "Excuse me, Olivia," said Mr. Jacobson. "I'm talking now." "Did nobody else just see that? Somebody needs to get an ambulance sent to Andrew's house now." As I spoke, Andrew's video cut off. "No, I'm fine," said Andrew in a hollow and weary voice. "I don't know what Olivia's making a fuss about. Please, carry on, Mr. Jacobson." Mr. Jacobson glared for a moment, presumably at me, before continuing. The next day, I learned from an email that Andrew was taking an indefinite leave of absence due to undisclosed medical reasons. May found fewer gigs over the next few weeks. At my insistence, she reluctantly agreed to let me cover her portion of the rent until she found stable employment. The long hours of joblessness had started to wear on her. She would often get snappy or withdrawn. She had probably sent out 100 job applications at this point without any offers. When she wasn't applying for jobs, she spent much of her time tending to her ever-growing collection of small cacti. I laughed when she informed me that she had assigned a name and a personality to each of them. She called them substitute friends. "Good night, Olivia," she told me late one evening. As she headed into her bedroom, I noticed the zipper and that it had drifted an inch down her head. I waited for an hour before creeping as quietly as I could into her room. I opened the door carefully and stood still for several moments, until I could discern her rhythmic breathing. I stepped over the carpet until I reached her bed, where she lay asleep. No blood had come out of the opening made by the zipper, not yet at least. Perhaps not at all if I intervened. I reached carefully for her. I would have a lot of uncomfortable explaining to do if May awoke to find me there, but I felt compelled to act all the same. I gripped the zipper and slowly pulled it up. May started to reach for it as if to scratch an itch, but her arm drifted aside at the last moment. Finally, the zipper set in place at its starting point. I let go and tiptoed out of the room and closed the door behind me. It became a regular ritual. When May had a rough or restless day, the zipper would loosen and start to descend, and I would sneak into her room in the late night or early morning to discreetly return it. The next day, the zipper would always be gone. I noticed one on me too. It was on my back, near my right shoulder blade. The longer I worked, the further that it dropped. Every morning and every evening, I tugged it back into place. The job kept me too busy to dwell much of the insanity of the whole situation. I had Andrew's work to worry about in addition to my own. Mr. Jacobson grilled me in front of the whole team the next morning. Olivia once again failed to account for recent market fluctuations in her weekly report. I'm sorry, I said, distracted by the crimson streak running down Kelly's neck. It won't happen again. A call from Mr. Jacobson late that evening interrupted a board game May and I were playing. "Yes," I said, figuring that there must be some kind of emergency. "Olivia, am I correct that you have been diligent in your social isolation?" "Yes," I said, surprised by the question. "Good," said Mr. Jacobson. "So have I. So I'm assuming you have no objection to your upcoming performance review being in person." Yeah, that's fine, of course," I said, ever acquiescent to my boss's demands. The call left me alarmed though. Why would he insist on seeing me in person after I had been working virtually for so long? I worried that he wanted to fire me, and had decided that it would be more polite to do so in person. I barely had time to settle down before I heard May shriek. While I had been on the phone, she had gone into a room. I arrived to find her hand clasped against her head, just behind her left ear. Had the zipper appeared, and had she finally noticed it? "I should have listened to you and not put Shirley up so high," she said, referencing a cactus that she had placed on her bookshelf. "I had forgotten it was there and leaned in to get something. I think there's a thorn stuck in me now." I took a closer look. The zipper had in fact reappeared, and the thorn protruded through the loop in its pull tab into her skin. She reached to yank out the thorn. "Stop," I called. "You'll move the zipper." We were both silent for a moment. "Did you say? Just let me get it out of you." I proceeded to pluck out the thorn. As I did so, I moved precisely enough to avoid touching the zipper, which then receded into her skin. May sat down with me afterwards. "Why didn't you tell me that you were still seeing them?" she asked. I took a deep breath. "I thought you would think that I was crazy." "I would think, and I do think, that you need help," she said. "How often have you been seeing them?" Tears welled in my eyes as I opened up and told her how I had seen them on everyone that I had encountered lately. "Including on me?" she asked. I nodded. I've adjusted yours before when it's gotten loose." I didn't give any more detail. I knew that I had volunteered enough already. "Okay," said May. She thought for a moment. "We're going to get through this, Olivia. I used to see someone, a therapist, and maybe they can help you too." Soon, I had an appointment scheduled for next week. When it came time for my performance review, May offered to drive me to the office. I resisted at first as I didn't want to trouble her unnecessarily, but she insisted that she was worried about my mental health and pointed out that she had nothing better to do that day. She watched from the car as I approached the office building. I had put on full business attire for the first time in months. When I reached the front door, I found it to be locked, and my key card wouldn't open it. I called up Mr. Jacobson. "Oh, I'm so sorry, Olivia. I didn't specify the location, did I? I would happily meet you in the office, but corporate still has the whole floor shut down. We aren't allowed to step foot in there. I know it's unconventional, but I think we'll have to do this at my place." He read out his home address. "He said what?" screamed May after I returned to the car. "You didn't agree to it, did you?" "I know it's weird, but I need this job." "Olivia refused to go," said May, "and file a complaint with HR. There's no good reason for him to invite you to his place for this. I know it's fishy, but I need this to go well. If I tell him I'm uncomfortable about it, who knows what he'll do in response." "Olivia, I know what he's like and how this job is treating you. Sometimes you have to fight back even when it's difficult." "I don't want to be rude, May, but somebody has to pay our rent. I can't lose this job, and I'm not going to risk starting a conflict with my boss over potentially nothing." May drove me there, but when we pulled up outside a split-level home, she insisted that she would come inside if I was gone for very long. Mr. Jacobson ushered me in moments after I rang the doorbell. He led me to a living room. I took a seat on a dark blue couch and he closed the blinds. "I appreciate you coming down here," he said as he took a seat across from me. "Let's get started." I remained nervous about the content of the performance review, but he at least seemed intent on getting to business. "Your performance has been problematic," I gulped. "For now, I see no choice but to recommend to management that you be let go at the end of the quarter." As he spoke, I noticed a shiny object jostling at the top of the center of his forehead. It was barely visible behind his graying bangs. "That is, unless you persuade me to send along a more positive assessment. I could even request that you be given a raise." Time slowed as I realized just how right May had been. I was such an idiot. Why had I come here? I should have listened to her. "So," continued Mr. Jacobson, "if you want to persuade me to do that, why don't you come upstairs with me? My wife's away, it's just the two of us. We can all come out of this as winners." My heart throbbed and I felt like I was suffocating. The right answer was to say no, obviously, and get the heck out. I had taken every insult he had given to me. I realized that he had been testing me since I started my job. He noticed that I wouldn't fight back, even when his criticism was unjustified. The constant humiliation had gotten me used to feeling helpless. Yes, how about we go upstairs?" I said. I decided to play the part he had written for me. I slowly followed him, painfully lifting my legs up each step until we arrived at a door to his bedroom. He followed me inside. Your shirt. Why don't you just go ahead and take that off?" I said meekly. He smiled widely as he unbuttoned it. I reached my hand steadily towards his face as if to caress it. Only instead, I grabbed the zipper that was in the center of his forehead and pulled rapidly, with all of my might. The zipper traveled down his nose, jumped from the top of his mouth to the bottom, and then fell all the way to his waist. He gave a mystified expression. I waited in silence for a moment as he looked me over in confusion. Nothing seemed to be happening. May was right once again. I was crazy. There never were any zippers. What was I going to do now? Then Mr. Jacobson gargled, and all at once, his body opened up. His head split in two. Brains, mucus, saliva, and blood burst outwards. His chest followed. Organs and chunks of flesh spewed onto the floor, leaving only bare bones behind. The lower half of his body and a hollow flap of skin that had once covered his torso collapsed into a grotesque heap. Another scream joined mine. I turned to find May at the door to his room. She had seen everything. We drove home in shocked silence. When we pulled into our driveway, I told May that we needed to call the police and try to tell them what happened. But then an alert had appeared on my phone. I had received an email from Mr. Jacobson. It was sent to my whole team. In it, Mr. Jacobson, or whoever was operating his email account, announced that he was taking indefinite leave due to a medical emergency. I read it out loud to May. Neither of us knew what to make of it. How could Mr. Jacobson have sent this given what had just happened to him? If it was somebody else using his account, then why would they be pretending to be him? My company soon hired a replacement for Mr. Jacobson. They're much better, more reasonable, fairer with subordinates, and easier to get along with. A replacement for Andrew arrived 2 weeks later, and when we collaborate, our new boss gives both of us credit. My mental health has improved. I haven't seen a zipper on anyone since my boss's insides spilled out onto his bedroom floor. It's been weeks since May and I talked about what happened. She's been busy with a position that she landed teaching at a local community college, She's seeing someone new now and we both think that he's an improvement over Gerald. I've started growing a cactus of my own. It has an awkward, contorted shape and it's somehow pricklier than any of May's. She insisted that I give it a name. I still check in with Mr. Jacobson every morning. I give him more water than he deserves and I've yet to find a zipper on his rough, green skin. A few months ago, I described how I began seeing zippers on the skin of the people around me. Recent events have prompted me to update you on my circumstances. This is fairly lengthy, but for reasons that will become clear below, I've decided to provide some degree of detail about what has happened and who is responsible for it. The raging headache that I had woken up with had only worsened as morning stretched into early afternoon. I also felt sore everywhere, which made the frequent nausea-induced trips to the bathroom all the more uncomfortable. "How are you not affected by any of this?" I whimpered to May. We had gotten our second dose together the previous afternoon. "I'm a bit foggy up here," she said, gesturing to her head before continuing to type at her work computer. "But yeah, that's about it. I usually don't react much to these things. I always did, and I hated needles too. I'm embarrassed to admit that I would have put off getting it because of that, but May had pushed me to register as soon as it became an option." My gaze shifted to the cactus on my windowsill. Mr. Jacobson, I still called it. It had been 3 months now since I had last seen the zippers, since the real Mr. Jacobson had threatened to fire me if I didn't sleep with him, since my housemate and I watched his guts spill out onto his bedroom floor. We had expected to see the grisly scene that we had left behind plastered over the evening news. Instead, I had received an inexplicable email announcing that Mr. Jacobson was taking indefinite medical leave. The expected consequences eluded us. Eventually, we had moved on with our lives. I continued teleworking, though I was finally expected to return to the office next week. When May wasn't giving virtual lectures or writing research papers, she tended to her cacti or spent time with me or her new boyfriend. Throughout the day, she periodically brought water, applesauce, and anything else I needed to the couch in our shared living room where I lay. When I thanked her, she told me it was the least she could do since I had helped her deal with her breakup with Gerald that winter. I told her that I was just glad that she and Casey were together now. "Hey, you could always try to find a partner yourself, you know." Her tone was half joking, but I could tell she was also trying to nudge me out of the complacency that I had fallen into. "You haven't brought somebody back here since what? That girl from trivia night last January." I resisted sharing the rejoinders that came to mind. I knew that over the past year and a half, I had grown too comfortable with the isolated routine that I had settled into. My work phone buzzed. I nearly dropped it when I read the email. "Let's all keep David Jacobson in our prayers as he recovers from his latest operation. With any luck, he'll pull through and resume his career at Abernathy Industries." I remembered the heap of goop that May and I left behind. How does somebody recover from that? "Is something wrong?" asked May. Just feeling nauseous again," I replied, not wholly untruthfully. I didn't want to drag her any further into whatever was going on with Mr. Jacobson. There were phone and email records between me and him that day, but it was possible that no one else knew that May had been there with me. If that was the case, then I wanted to keep it that way. Mr. Jacobson had really died, right? In other circumstances, I would have assumed that I had been delusional, but May had seen it too. None of this made any sense. The emails were a mirage, a charade. He wasn't really coming back, that was impossible. But then again, so was the zipper that I had pulled down his torso. When I made my long-awaited return to the office, the first thing I encountered was a new security station in the building lobby. As the guard examined my ID, I noticed something strange on his forehead. At first, I thought it was a tattoo of some kind, but who gets a tattoo there? I looked more closely. My eyes widened when I realized that it consisted of numbers that were changing. It left me unsettled. "You're free to go in," he said. I took my badge and hurried to the elevator. I punched 15. On the way up, the elevator stopped on the 12th floor. Biomed, a woman in a white lab coat, joined me. In her blurry reflection on the metal door, I discerned a small row of neon green digits spread across her forehead. Like with a digital clock, the number on the far right decreased about every second. On the 15th floor, I entered a door marked Finances and made my way down the central hallway. I came across Kelly, who stood by the water cooler that bordered my office. "Hey Olivia, it's nice to see you in person again." She inflected her usual monotone with only the tiniest hint of enthusiasm. As we spoke, I examined her as discreetly as I could. Fortunately, she lacked any numbers on her forehead or, for that matter, any signs of the zipper that I had spotted months earlier on her right cheek. Our cell phones buzzed simultaneously. An email directed us to report to the office of our chief regional executive. When we arrived, 2 empty chairs awaited us in front of her desk. Kelly and I exchanged a nervous glance before sitting down. Miss Franklin was near the top of the corporate food chain. Something serious had to be happening for her to get involved. The numbers on Miss Franklin's forehead distracted me from the content of the meeting. 49 hours, 24 minutes, and 17 seconds. 49-24-16. 49-24-15. I nodded to words like presentation and executive board members as the countdown diverted my attention. 49-23-59. What would happen when the numbers hit 0? Yes, that sounds good," said Kelly. "We'll start preparing right away." If Kelly could see them too, she gave no sign of it. 49-23-48. Was I viewing Miss Franklin's death clock? When the time ran out, would her insides spill out like Mr. Jacobson's had? "Olivia," asked Miss Franklin, "what about you?" "Oh, I'm sorry, what's the question?" Miss Franklin glared at me impatiently. "Is Wednesday enough time for you?" "Yes, that's fine, Wednesday, sure." 49-23-36. "Good," Miss Franklin continued. "By the way, I have some positive news to share with you about your previous team leader." My heart dropped. No, don't let her say. "Mr. Jacobson will be returning here before long. The latest operation was a success." "Well, isn't that just great news?" exclaimed Kelly. I knew my prayers would be heard. Afterwards, I applied every ounce of my self-control to maintain my composure as I debriefed with Kelly in her office. I picked up from her that we had been assigned to provide a detailed presentation on our branch's financial status to a panel of executives following recent changes in leadership. "By the way, Kelly, did you notice anything odd about Miss Franklin's appearance?" I asked. "What do you mean?" "Oh, nothing, never mind." As I suspected, it seemed that I was the only one seeing the countdowns. Once we had settled on a way to divide the work, I excused myself and rushed to my office. Inside, I closed the door and sat with my head on my desk. Mr. Jacobson was really coming back. Half my coworkers had countdowns displayed on their foreheads, and I was expected to make a major presentation in 2 days. I needed to get out of here. I resolved at that moment to resign and never look back. I simply wasn't going to be here whenever Mr. Jacobson returned. I typed up a letter of resignation with the intention of handing it to Roger, my team leader, the next morning. When I returned home that evening, May pulled up a chair for me at the kitchen table where she, Casey, and a young man they introduced to me as Ray were eating. Casey put together a plate of takeout for me as Ray explained that he was an old friend of Casey's and they had played guitar in May's band in college. I'm actually the one that introduced them to each other, Ray said with an earnest smile. Over dinner, he brought the three of us to laughter as he related hijinks that he had engaged in at various points with Casey and May. There was so much I felt that I needed to say. I wanted to confide in May that I was seeing things again, that Mr. Jacobson was somehow coming back, and that I was finally quitting my job. But instead, I let the evening carry me away. All three lacked digital countdowns on their faces, after all. Plus, nothing that happened tonight would change what was going to happen tomorrow. And Casey eventually asked if I minded if Ray crashed for the night on our couch, and I told him it was totally fine. After spending so much time around people like me, dreary, world-weary, I found Ray a breath of fresh air. After dinner, Casey hooked our dusty Nintendo 64 up to the television, although I placed a distant fourth in the many rounds of Super Smash Bros. That followed. I enjoyed taking my mind off of my responsibilities. Eventually, Casey and, with a wink, May retreated to May's room for the night, as Ray scooted closer to me. If you want to get better, explained Ray as we played another match, you need to learn how to spike. Hit down A when you're on top of me, like this. I tried but failed again. No, like this, he said, gently placing his hand over mine as he executed the maneuver. After sensing that I was okay with that, he squeezed my hand a bit. I barely held back my laughter. His gesture struck me as cheesy yet also sweet. I realized that he was trying to gauge my reaction, so I smiled and placed my other hand over his. He was a good kisser. We retreated to my room where we made out for over an hour. With him, this felt refreshingly like its own end, rather than an activity to rush through to get to something else. We did eventually escalate things a step, and soon after that, he went to sleep with me wrapped around him. As I felt the beat of his relaxed heart, I realized just how much over my 1.5 years of isolation that I had grown to miss physical affection, not just romantic but platonic as well. My dreams took me back to a different time. We had just moved in, my grandmother was still alive, May was flirting over her phone with Gerald, and we were planning to head to a bar for trivia that evening. An ominous rumbling at the front door got my attention. Something's coming for us, I told May, but she took no notice. The rumbling got louder until the door burst open, revealing the bald head and tall frame of my boss. I felt myself wake from what seemed like a deep slumber. Suddenly, a sharp, paralyzing pain spread from my chest to the rest of my body. With immense effort, I used my left arm to flip on my bedside lamp. I let out a panicked yell as the light revealed that the figure that I held onto was no longer Ray, but instead the bald, tall man who death itself seemingly could not stop. Hundreds of long, sharp thorns protruded from his sickly green skin. Many had dug their way into me, and as he sat up, he dragged my body with his. My blood spilled out, soaking through my t-shirt and dripping onto my bedsheets. I put my hand against him and, ignoring the barb that protruded through my palm, shoved until I could pull myself free. I toppled to the floor. He stepped towards me slowly, his frame towering over mine. "I'm coming for you, Olivia," he taunted in a gravelly voice. "I offered you everything, but you never gave me what you promised in return. It's time we even the score." He leaned down and grabbed my neck as I tried to squirm away from him. "Get away, you freak!" I kicked at him with all the force that I could muster. "Ow, Jesus, what's wrong?" said Ray. "Get off me!" As my senses returned, I saw that it was the early morning. Mr. Jacobson had only haunted my dreams as he had so many times before. "Dang," said Ray, nursing a bruise on his leg. "That really hurt." "Oh, I'm so sorry," I said. I... Everything came flooding back. The sense of self-hatred that Mr. Jacobson had instilled in me over my first 2 years on the job. The feeling of constant powerlessness that I had felt around him. That moment of desperation when I had undone the zipper that stretched from his head to his waist. Just before anything happened, when I had just stood there wondering if I had lost my mind. The sense as I had fled that I had fought back too much, in the wrong way, in a way that somebody like me wasn't supposed to fight. I realized that I was crying. Ray brought me a tissue. I stuttered between sniffs. "I think you should go to the couch in the other room." "All right, yeah, sure." "Ray, it's not your fault, okay? You didn't do anything wrong. I just need to be alone." I took a long shower and got dressed for work. I found May waiting for me in the kitchen. Ray had clued her in that something was up with me before leaving with Casey. I told her everything. The countdowns, the news of Mr. Jacobson's imminent return, my intention to resign, and the horrible dream that had caused me to lash out at Ray. "He can't still be alive," said May. "I saw it too." "I know, but I can't shake the feeling." "Your instincts are right, Olivia. You need to get the heck out of that company. Have you followed the news about the stuff the founder was up to? The sooner you leave that place, the better. Hopefully, today will be my last." "Not hopefully," she declared. "Today, you need to hand over your letter and walk out. If you keep seeing the countdowns, well, then we'll deal with that later together, okay? And if that creep or anybody else gives you any trouble, just call me, and Casey and I will come and kick their butt. Casey has a taser, you know, and he's trained to use it." I laughed. "May, I'm sure that it won't come to that, but thank you. This will all be over soon, and then I'll just have the challenge of finding a new job to worry about. That won't be easy, but I've saved up enough to manage for a little while. I'll get through this." 25 hours, 23 minutes, and 48 seconds. Read the forehead of the lobby officer that morning. The same woman joined me in the elevator. Her curly blonde hair prevented me from getting a clear look at the number on her forehead. Compared to yesterday, she seemed tired and distressed, and she leaned against the elevator wall as we ascended. As I made my way to my office, I spotted Roger drinking from the cooler. The liquid had an obvious murky green tinge to it, but he gulped it down anyway. "Roger, are you sure?" I stopped when I saw the numbers appear on his forehead. 251950. "You all right, Olivia?" 251949. Yeah, I'm fine." The water seemed to have caused the countdown to appear on Roger. Who knows how else it was spreading. I needed to get out of here fast. In the meantime, I vowed to keep my distance from my coworkers and to avoid eating or drinking anything on the building premises. I settled into my office and I reviewed the letter. My desk phone rang the moment that I hit print. "My office, now," said Miss Franklin's voice. When I arrived, one empty chair waited for me. Miss Franklin sat with her arms folded before her on the desk. "Sit," she ordered. I did so. "What's this about?" I tried my best to maintain normal eye contact, despite the numbers that flashed on her forehead. 24 hours, 58 minutes, and 12 seconds. "You know what this is about," she responded. "You want to resign." "What? How do you—" "Oh, please," she said with a cold smirk. "It's your right to leave if you want to. I'll just need you to sign a few forms in advance." She handed me a pen and a printed document. The words non-disclosure and confidentiality agreement ran across the front page. I flipped through it to find it littered with terms like bioorganic, contagion, discrete experiments, and unknowing subjects. "What is this?" I asked. Miss Franklin's demeanor hardened as her timer hit 24 hours and 57 minutes. "I know what you've seen. Our late CEO, Mason Abernathy, didn't exactly believe in strict adherence to safety regulations, and the reforms implemented by his successor have yet to reach us. At Mason Abernathy's direction, our lab chiefs have acted a bit overly enthusiastic when it came to selecting test subjects. Our development schedules didn't leave time for things like knowing consent." As she spoke, I remembered how whole floors had been shut down in terms like transfection and electrotransmission, appearing in the periphery of the financial reports that I received. I thought about the zippers too. "All this stuff, the zippers, everything, it's because you've been experimenting on us, on your own employees. And you let us infect others too, didn't you?" She didn't respond, instead maintaining a smug smile as her countdown ticked down. "And now, I sputtered, my head spinning. "You want me to sign away my right to tell anybody about it after I leave? We've been on to you since we learned that your exposure allowed you to see the experiments far more clearly than others could. I figured you would piece it all together sooner or later," said Miss Franklin. "And yes, that is what I want." "No way, I'm telling everyone." "No, I don't think you will be," said Miss Franklin. She leaned forward and spoke in a low and firm voice. "I know what you did to Mr. Jacobson." I understood what she was talking about, but I feigned ignorance anyway. "What? What do you mean?" "Assault and battery with intent to kill carries a hefty sentence. And that's not all. I also know who was there with you when you did it. The accessory to your crime. How would you like your housemate to become your cellmate?" Oh God, no. Miss Franklin knew just how to manipulate me. I had lost. I may have been willing to risk my own future, but I wasn't also about to let May go down with me. Not after I had dragged her into this mess. "If you know what you claim to, why didn't you turn us in already?" I said. "Oh, it was a simple cost-benefit analysis. If the police had investigated, they may have uncovered some unorthodox research methods. Better to keep you on board. But that calculus can always change. Now, will you please sign this?" As I scribbled my signature across the last page, Miss Franklin assured me that the zippers had faded. It was only a temporary condition. I did impress her on what kind of experiment would cause them to appear. I didn't want to know. "By all this stuff, as you said a moment ago, I assume you mean just the zippers, right? You haven't seen anything else strange, now have you, Olivia?" "No, nothing since then," I replied, as her clock ticked down. I had revealed enough to her already. "You sure about that?" she asked suspiciously. "Yeah." I handed her the signed confidentiality agreement, along with my resignation letter. "There's one more condition, Olivia. Your employment ends after you give the presentation tomorrow morning. It's an important occasion, and it's too late for me to find somebody else to take your place." "Oh," I muttered. I didn't want to be here when Miss Franklin's countdown hit 0. I argued, but Miss Franklin refused to budge. I did some quick mental math. The presentation was set for 9 a.m., about 2 hours before the timers that I had seen were set to run out. My part would only last 15 minutes. I could give the presentation and walk out the door. I would have more than enough time to get out of Dodge. Reluctantly, I agreed to her demand. "I do have one question for you, Miss Franklin," I said as I backed towards the door. "And given what happened to him, how exactly is Mr. Jacobson supposed to be coming back?" "To be perfectly honest with you, even I don't know that." Her countdown read 24 hours, 47 minutes, and 20 seconds as I closed the door to her office. I barely slept that night. I told May that I just needed to stop by the office briefly that morning to sign some forms. Just be safe and get out of there before the countdowns you're seeing hit 0, okay? I told her that I would do both. When I arrived at the conference room the next morning, Kelly was setting up our PowerPoint presentation. Like me, she had donned a formal dress skirt and jacket for the occasion. She was also the only other employee that I had seen that morning without a countdown. Whatever was spreading around the office hadn't gotten to her yet. I knew that I should warn her about the messed up practices occurring at our company, that I should tell her to leave before she too had numbers plastered on her forehead. But I didn't want to cause more trouble when I was so close to getting out, and it's not like she would believe me anyway. Right at 9 a.m., Miss Franklin led in a group of 6 other executives who took seats at the conference table. As Kelly began her part, I studied their faces. As with Miss Franklin, a countdown ran on each of their foreheads. An hour 56 and 19 seconds read one. 1:58:57 read another. My pulse quickened as I realized Kelly had exceeded her allotted 15 minutes. The numbers on the forehead of the executive closest to me decreased from an hour 32 minutes and 12 seconds to an hour 32 and 11 seconds. Kelly wrapped up her part and asked if there were any questions. 4 executives raised their hands. It's going to be okay, I repeated to myself. I still had plenty of time. When Kelly had finally finished answering questions, the time on the nearest executive had counted down to 1 hour and 19 minutes. As Miss Franklin instructed me to begin, her phone buzzed. Oh, hold off for a second, Olivia. I just wanted to share some good news. I gulped as I felt sweat run down my side. Our team leader, Mr. Jacobson, is fully recovered. He'll be returning here at once. The executives exchanged pleasantries. So happy to hear that, said one of them. He has a promising future at Abernathy Industries, said another. Miss Franklin directed me to start. Suppressing a new wave of panicked thoughts, I began the slideshow and turned to the audience, only to gasp at what I saw. The numbers in their countdowns were decreasing more quickly, 10 seconds at a time. I stuttered. Miss Franklin adopted a concerned look. Is something wrong, Olivia? Now 30 seconds at a time. I took a deep breath and started to talk, only for my phone to go off. Oh, sorry, I said, ignoring a message from May as I switched it to silent. I tried to speak, but words escaped me. My voice failed to enunciate the script that I had prepared. Excuse me, please, let me step outside for just a second and get some water. One of the executives, a sharply dressed man with slicked back hair who appeared younger than the rest, used a picture on the conference table to fill up a small styrofoam cup. With a reassuring smile, he handed it to me. Here you go. Just drink as much as you need and start when you're ready. I looked down at the water. It was a disgusting deep shade of green. With a pop, something swam to its surface. Startled, I dropped the cup, spilling its contents over the carpet. Olivia, snapped Miss Franklin. Start your presentation now. 55 minutes and 32 seconds. 45 minutes and 32 seconds. I grew dizzy as I realized I was breathing heavily. I sensed the judgmental gazes of Miss Franklin and the other executives, and the disappointment felt towards me by Kelly for screwing up our group presentation. I stumbled and fell. I opened my eyes to find the young executive sitting over me. Are you okay? He asked. Before I could respond, I watched as the countdown on his forehead ticked to 0. The digits initially lit up, turning a shade brighter, before receding into his skin. The man didn't explode or react at all for that matter. He just continued to look me over with concern. He asked if I needed a doctor. No, I was just a little nervous, that's all. I started to calm down as I felt that it was going to be okay. Maybe these countdowns didn't have any effect. Maybe like the zippers, they would all just fade away. But that's when he coughed. Then again, more violently. He gripped his hand around his neck as his mouth expelled blood. I frantically crawled backwards as he held his head back and emitted a gargled scream. Blood with a yellow-green hue boiled through his skin, replacing it with a darker and rougher surface. His shrieks joined those of the remaining executives, all of whom appeared to be undergoing the same agonizing transformation. Closer to me, the younger executive's face disintegrated into a sludgy and pinkish heap as a new form replaced it. His legs thickened and lengthened. Slowly, he rose up until he was looking down at me. "I told you I would come back for you, Olivia," said the last voice that I wanted to hear. No, that's impossible," I cried. "Oh, Olivia, how I missed you," said another Mr. Jacobson, whose frame burst through the dress Miss Franklin had been wearing. I realized that he was covered in sharp thorns. "I would like to resume your performance review." Kelly understandably panicked and darted for the door. I followed her, my flats splashing through puddles of liquefied goo with each step. "Where do you think you're going, my dear Olivia?" teased one of the Mr. Jacobsons. As I hurried past him, he lifted and extended a prickly arm in my direction. "Come on!" cried Kelly, holding the door open for me. As I reached her, she screeched as several thorns flew through the air and lodged in her neck. She lost balance as we stumbled down the hallway. "Oh God, what's happening, Olivia?" I helped her into an office where we hid as Mr. Jacobson's voice taunted us. "Hide all you want to, Olivia. What if Mia will find you and your esteemed coworker?" "Hold still," I whispered as I yanked 4 thorns out of Kelly. Her skin around where they had lodged had changed color. I watched in horror as a countdown had emerged on her forehead. 4 seconds. "Oh no," I gasped. The thorns had infected her too, and she had mere moments before transforming. Kelly barely had time to respond before she had started shaking. I had to leave her behind. I burst out of the office and into the hallway. When I turned a corner to reach my destination, I crashed into a Mr. Jacobson. "Leaving so soon?" he sneered as I climbed to my feet. "We can't have that now, can we?" I heard an elevator door open and then watched as a large gash had extended across his chest. He collapsed. "Come on!" howled a man in the elevator. I obeyed him, hopping over the body in front of me and joining him. The door shut just before a crowd of Mr. Jacobsons had descended upon us. The man punched the button to floor 12. He had disheveled blonde hair, and I realized that he was bleeding profusely. "This is all my fault. I had no idea how the samples from the bedroom would interact with." "I don't care," I screamed. "Why are we going to floor 12 instead of the lobby? Get us out of here." "It's too late for me. As for you, you're going to want to head to my office, room 1205. There are 2 syringes in my top desk drawer. Inject them both in your arm, one after the other." "What? Why?" With a trembling hand, he pulled a thorn out of my neck. In my blurry reflection, I realized a countdown had begun running on my forehead. "Oh no. Kelly had only lasted about 10 seconds. "You were only hit by 1, you still have a few minutes. If you use it on time, it's fast acting enough to protect you. But you may also experience some side effects." He mumbled weakly as the doors opened. I charged out, leaving the dying man behind. I stepped through blood and mucus-like residue as I passed rooms 1200, 1201, 1202. "Olivia, are you down here?" rang out Mr. Jacobson's voice from around a corner. I crept into room 1202 and waited behind a desk. As I did so, I used a hand mirror I found there to get a better look at my countdown. 2 minutes and 2 seconds. Once Mr. Jacobson passed, I scurried into room 1205. A yellowish liquid filled the thick barrels of these syringes that I located on the desk inside. I examined their long needles. I hated these things. It was hard enough having somebody else administer a shot to me. Screw it, I thought. Any fate was better than transforming into my harasser. I ripped off my stained suit jacket, rolled up my sleeve, and jabbed the needle of the first syringe into my left arm, and steadily pressed the plunger downwards. There was so much liquid. I dug the needle deeper into my skin and kept pressing even as a burning sensation spread through my insides and drops of blood trickled down my arm. I let out a low grunt as I finally injected all of the contents. "I think I heard something," said Mr. Jacobson. "She's around here." I had less than a minute. Taking the syringes with me, I darted towards the elevator. It arrived quickly. Inside, I hit lobby and door close. The doors began to shut, but at the last moment, a long arm reached through, followed by an all too familiar face. "Found you," Mr. Jacobson yelled. I jabbed the empty syringe at him. The needle dug into his eye. The doors finally closed when he jolted backwards as he attempted to dislodge it. As the elevator descended below floor 6, my hazy reflection revealed that the number in my countdown had also dropped to a single digit. I let out a shrill howl as I dug the remaining needle into my arm. The substance that I injected sent torturing shockwaves throughout my body. Still, I pressed further until I had emptied it. Within moments, I lost most of my muscle control. I was too weak to remove the second syringe from where it dangled from my arm. When the doors revealed the building lobby, I collapsed onto the polished marble floor. Ignoring the seething pain that I felt all over, I used my chin and my right arm to pull myself forward. The lobby's security guard approached. I looked up and with disappointment, realized that his appearance had changed for the worse. "Well done, Olivia," said Mr. Jacobson. "I didn't think you would make it this far." He lifted me by the hair. "There's no zipper for you to pull this time, now is there, Olivia?" He cackled. My vision started to fade. I heard a click sound followed by a loud buzzing. Then Mr. Jacobson released me as we both fell to the ground. The remaining memories of that day are blurry. I recall glimpsing Casey holding a taser, May calling my name and the pair dragging me between them to the parking lot outside. I woke up this morning to find myself back where I had started. My head throbs, my sore muscles shake as I bury myself beneath a pile of blankets on the living room couch. May periodically brings me food and water. We speak as soon as I have enough strength to sit up for a few minutes. As I expected, she had driven down there with Casey when I didn't respond to her attempts to check in with me. There will be another cover-up, another scrubbing of the incident and maybe even my workspace itself from the internet. But we're not going to just let this go. We tried that before. The status quo needs to be changed if we're ever going to move forward. An envelope containing a check slips under the door to the driveway. "This is BS," says Casey as he tosses it to me. The amount is impressive. The memo reads, "Silence." May and I exchange a sly smile before ripping it to pieces.